Ever catch yourself doom scrolling TikTok at 2 a.m.? Eyes burning. Room completely dark. Your phone lighting up your face as you know you have to wake up at 7, but you keep swiping. Just one more video, then suddenly it's 2:37 a.m. The alarm rings a few hours later. You hit snooze 5 times. You drag yourself out of bed exhausted, and somehow, before the day even begins, you already feel behind. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Late at night, something strange happens to our sense of time. The world gets quiet, your room is dark, and the only light in the space comes from the glow of your phone. At first it feels harmless. You tell yourself you're just relaxing after a long day. Maybe you worked hard, maybe you studied all afternoon, maybe your brain simply wants a break. So you open TikTok or Instagram or YouTube. Just a few quick videos, nothing serious, nothing that should keep you up too long. One funny clip, one motivational speech, one random life hack. And suddenly the algorithm has you. Video after video loads instantly. Your thumb keeps swiping without even thinking. You laugh at something, then you learn a random fact about productivity. Then you watch someone else's morning routine, someone waking up at 5 a.m., drinking coffee while the sunrise fills their apartment. For a moment you feel inspired, then you check the clock. 1:42 a.m. Your brain does that quick calculation. If I sleep now, I'll still get 5 hours. So you keep scrolling, just a little longer, but time moves differently when you're on your phone. 5 minutes feels like 30 seconds. 30 minutes disappears without warning, and before you realize it, the clock says 2:19. Now the guilt starts creeping in. You tell yourself, okay, after this video. But the next one is interesting, and the next one is hilarious. Then another appears about productivity, ironically explaining why successful people wake up early. And there you are, watching it at 2:30 in the morning. Your phone becomes this strange mirror. On one side, it shows you the life you wish you had. Early mornings, morning workouts, people journaling with coffee while the sun rises, calm, focused, disciplined. But on the other side, it quietly reveals the life you're actually living. Lying sideways in bed, one eye half closed, scrolling endlessly. And the gap between those two lives starts to feel bigger every night. Not because you don't want to change, you do. But change always feels like something you'll start tomorrow. Tomorrow you'll sleep earlier. Tomorrow you'll wake up motivated. Tomorrow you'll finally build a routine. But when tomorrow comes, the alarm rings. Your hand reaches for the snooze button, and the cycle begins all over again. Morning always arrives faster than expected. The alarm rings. That sharp mechanical sound cuts through the quiet of your room. For a brief second, you're confused. Your eyes open halfway. Your brain tries to remember what day it is. Then reality hits. You barely slept. Your phone is still lying next to you, but the screen lights up with the alarm. 7 a.m. You stare at it for a moment. Your body feels heavy. Your eyes burn. Your brain feels foggy, like it's still trapped somewhere in the middle of the night. So your hand slowly reaches over and presses snooze. 9 more minutes. That feels like mercy. 9 minutes where you don't have to move. 9 minutes where you don't have to start the day. But 9 minutes later, the alarm rings again, and the same battle begins. Your brain knows you should get up, but your body refuses. So you snooze again, and again, and again, until suddenly it's 7:47. Now there's no time left. You rush out of bed. Your morning becomes chaos. No slow wake up, no calm routine, no planning the day, just panic. Maybe you grab coffee, maybe you skip breakfast, maybe you promise yourself that tonight will be different. Tonight you'll sleep early. Tonight you'll be disciplined. Tonight you'll finally take control of your routine, but deep down, part of you already knows how this story usually ends. Because the problem isn't just one late night, it's a pattern. A quiet loop that repeats itself day after day. Late scrolling, short sleep, rushed mornings, low energy, another long day that feels harder than it should, then night comes again. And the cycle restarts. For many people in their 20s, this routine becomes strangely normal, especially in a world where your phone never stops competing for your attention. Every app is designed to keep you engaged. Every video is designed to make you stay just a little longer. And the term doom scrolling exists for a reason, because it feels exactly like that. You're scrolling. Even while a small voice inside you whispers that you should stop, but the truth is most people don't feel lazy. They feel stuck. They know they want a different life, more energy, better mornings, more focus, more control over their time. But every time they try to change something, they try to change everything. Wake up at 5 a.m., start working out every day. Meditate, journal, read books, drink green smoothies, build the perfect morning routine overnight. And the pressure becomes overwhelming because suddenly the goal isn't just waking up earlier, it's becoming a completely different person. And when change feels that big, most people don't even start. But Alex's story was different because Alex didn't try to fix his entire life overnight. He started with something almost laughably small, just 15 minutes. Alex was 27 years old and living in Austin. From the outside, his life looked pretty normal. He worked as a junior developer at a small tech startup, the kind of company with an open office, a coffee machine that never stopped running, and coworkers who constantly talked about productivity, side projects, and leveling up their careers. His salary was around $55,000 a year. Not terrible, not amazing either. Just enough to pay rent, grab food with friends, and occasionally buy something nice for himself. But lately, Alex had this uncomfortable feeling that his life was stuck. Not bad. Just stuck. Every morning felt rushed. Every afternoon felt tiring. And every night ended exactly the same way. Phone in hand, scrolling. Sometimes it was TikTok. Sometimes Instagram. Sometimes endless clips on YouTube. At first, he told himself it was harmless. Everyone did it. All his friends did it. Even his coworkers joked about staying up too late watching videos. But the more Alex paid attention, the more he noticed something strange. During the day, everyone talked about improving their lives. Better habits, better routines, better productivity. Someone at work mentioned waking up at 5 a.m. Another coworker talked about finishing a coding course before breakfast. Someone else bragged about going to the gym every morning before work. And Alex would just sit there quietly, sipping his third cup of coffee, trying to stay awake. Because the truth was, he wasn't waking up early. He was barely waking up at all. Most mornings felt like he was dragging his body out of quicksand, his brain foggy, his energy low, and his motivation somewhere near zero. Then there was social media, which somehow made everything worse. Because every time Alex opened his phone, it looked like everyone else had their life together. People posting sunrise workouts, people showing off their morning routines, people talking about winning the morning to win the day. Sometimes Alex would watch videos from people like Robin Sharma explaining the power of waking up early, or clips of Dwayne Johnson talking about discipline and starting the day before sunrise. And every time he saw those videos, Alex felt the same reaction. A mix of inspiration and frustration, because part of him wanted that kind of life. The energy, the focus, the control. But another part of him felt like it was impossible. How do you go from waking up exhausted at 8:30 to suddenly becoming the kind of person who wakes up at 5 a.m.? The gap felt enormous. So instead of changing anything, Alex kept doing what felt easier. He kept scrolling, night after night, not realizing that those tiny decisions were quietly shaping his entire life. At first, the consequences were small, easy to ignore. Alex would arrive at work a few minutes late, nothing serious. Just rushing through the door with messy hair, grabbing coffee before logging into his computer. His coworkers didn't say much. Startups were flexible. Deadlines were loose. Everyone was busy with their own projects. But over time, the small things started stacking up. Because when you start the day tired, everything feels heavier. Simple tasks take longer. Focus disappears faster. Alex would sit at his desk staring at lines of code, rereading the same section again and again because his brain refused to fully wake up. By noon, he already felt drained. So he drank more coffee, then another, and another. 3 cups before lunch became normal, sometimes 4, but caffeine couldn't fix what sleep deprivation was quietly destroying. His productivity dropped. Small mistakes started appearing in his work. A missed detail in a project, a delayed feature update, nothing catastrophic. Just enough to slowly chip away at his confidence. And the worst part? Alex knew exactly why it was happening. It wasn't because he lacked skill. He was actually pretty good at his job. It was because his energy was constantly running on empty. The late nights didn't just steal his sleep, they stole his focus, his motivation, his discipline. Even his health started to change. Late night scrolling often turned into late night snacking, chips, leftover pizza, whatever was easy. Over a few months, Alex noticed his clothes fitting a little tighter. His skin looked worse, dark circles slowly forming under his eyes. And every time he looked in the mirror in the morning, he saw the same exhausted face staring back. But the real moment came one random Wednesday morning. Alex woke up late again. He rushed to the bathroom, splashed cold water on his face, and looked up at the mirror. For a few seconds, he just stood there. Messy hair, heavy eyes, shoulders slightly slouched. And a strange thought crossed his mind. Not dramatic, not emotional, just brutally honest. What am I doing? Because suddenly the pattern became obvious. Every night he told himself he would change tomorrow. And every morning tomorrow looked exactly the same. It felt like watching his 20s quietly slip by. Not because something terrible happened, but because nothing meaningful was happening at all. Just the same routine. Over and over again. Scrolling, sleeping late, waking tired, repeating the cycle. Alex stood there staring at his reflection for a moment longer. Then he did something different. Instead of opening TikTok while brushing his teeth, he opened YouTube. And that random decision would lead him to a simple idea that would slowly change everything. An idea popularized by James Clear. Not about massive life changes, not about waking up at 4 a.m., just one small concept. Improve by 1%, start ridiculously small. And for Alex, that meant one tiny decision. Wake up 15 minutes earlier. That morning, Alex didn't plan on discovering anything life-changing. He was just standing in his kitchen, half awake, waiting for his coffee machine to finish brewing. The apartment was quiet. Sunlight was barely starting to creep through the blinds. And for once, instead of opening TikTok, he opened YouTube. At first, it was the usual random videos. Clips about productivity, a podcast segment, a short motivational talk. Then one thumbnail caught his attention. It mentioned a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. Alex had heard the title before. Friends mentioned it. Co-workers recommended it. But he had never actually looked into it. The video started explaining one simple idea. Most people fail to change their lives because they try to change everything at once. New year, new routine, new habits, new identity. Wake up at 5 a.m. Go to the gym every day. Meditate, read, journal, eat healthy, work harder, be disciplined. It sounded impressive, but it also sounded exhausting. And Alex felt something click immediately, because that was exactly what he had been doing. Every time he tried to fix his routine, he imagined becoming a completely different person overnight. Someone disciplined, someone motivated, someone who woke up at sunrise and crushed the day. But every attempt failed within a week, sometimes within 2 days. And the video explained why, because big change doesn't usually start big. It starts almost invisibly, with something so small it feels pointless. The speaker used an example that stuck in Alex's head. Improvement works like compound interest, just like investing money. If you improve by 1% every day, the results don't look dramatic at first. In fact, for a long time, it looks like nothing is happening at all. But over time, those tiny improvements stack together, and eventually the difference becomes massive. The same rule works in reverse. Small bad habits also compound. Scrolling 1 extra hour, sleeping a little less, skipping a workout, eating junk food late at night. None of those things ruin your life instantly, but over months and years, they slowly shape the person you become. Alex sat there quietly listening, because for the first time, the problem didn't feel like laziness. It felt like math. Small inputs, small outputs, compounding over time. And that idea felt strangely hopeful, because if small bad habits could slowly damage his life, maybe small good habits could slowly rebuild it. Not overnight, not dramatically, just little by little. And that's when Alex had a simple thought. Maybe the goal wasn't waking up at 5 a.m. Maybe the goal was just waking up 15 minutes earlier tomorrow. At first, the idea almost felt too simple. Wake up 15 minutes earlier? That didn't sound like a life-changing strategy. It didn't sound impressive. It definitely didn't sound like the kind of transformation people brag about on social media. But the more Alex thought about it, the more it made sense. Because every time he had tried to improve his life before, he went all in. He tried to wake up at 5 a.m. immediately. He tried to start intense workout routines. He tried to completely eliminate late-night scrolling overnight. And every single time, the same thing happened. He lasted a few days, maybe a week. Then the routine collapsed. Not because he didn't care, but because the change was too extreme, too sudden, too different from the life he was already living. That was the moment Alex understood something important. Real change doesn't come from heroic bursts of motivation. It comes from systems, small adjustments repeated over time, the exact idea that James Clear often talks about. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Alex realized his system was broken. His nights were chaotic. His mornings were rushed. And the gap between those two parts of his day was destroying his energy. But maybe the solution wasn't to build the perfect morning routine overnight. Maybe the solution was to start so small that failure almost became impossible. 15 minutes earlier. That was it. Not 2 hours earlier, not a full workout routine, just 15 minutes. The plan was simple. Set the alarm 15 minutes earlier, wake up, drink water, stretch for a few minutes. And most importantly, don't open his phone immediately. No TikTok, no Instagram, no scrolling, just a quiet start to the day. If it worked, he could repeat it. If it failed, he could try again the next morning. No pressure, no extreme discipline, just one tiny experiment. That night, Alex did something slightly different. He still watched videos, he still relaxed. But when the clock reached midnight, he paused for a moment. Normally, that would have been the moment he disappeared into 2 more hours of scrolling. Instead, he locked his phone, placed it face down on the nightstand, and set his alarm 15 minutes earlier than usual. 7:15 a.m. It didn't look dramatic. It didn't look powerful. But as Alex turned off the light and lay back on his pillow, he had a strange feeling. For the first time in a long time, change didn't feel impossible. It felt small, manageable, almost easy. And sometimes The smallest decisions are the ones that quietly change everything. The next morning didn't start perfectly. In fact, it started exactly the way most mornings usually start, with an alarm and resistance. Alex's phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. 7:15 a.m. For a second, his brain reacted automatically. The same instinct that had been trained for years. Hit snooze, roll over, sleep 9 more minutes. But then he remembered something. Last night's promise, just 15 minutes earlier. Nothing dramatic, just a small experiment. His hand hovered over the snooze button for a moment, then he slowly sat up. His body still felt heavy. His eyes still half closed, but he was awake. And technically, that counted. Alex reached for the glass of water he had placed beside his bed the night before. That part had been intentional. He read somewhere that drinking water right after waking up helps signal the body to start the day. So he drank the whole glass. It didn't magically give him energy, but it helped. Then he stood up and stretched. Nothing complicated. Just simple movements to wake up his body. His apartment was quiet. Outside the window, the sky was still pale and calm. And for the first time in a long while, Alex noticed something strange. Mornings actually felt peaceful. Normally, his mornings were rushed. Alarm, snooze, panic, coffee, laptop, work. But now there was space, just 15 minutes of it. But it felt different. He walked to the kitchen and made coffee, not in a hurry, not while checking notifications, just coffee, steam rising from the mug, sunlight slowly filling the room. For a few minutes, Alex simply sat there. No phone and no scrolling, no noise, and something subtle happened. His brain felt clearer, not perfect, not suddenly super productive, but calmer. Like the day hadn't attacked him yet, that first morning didn't change his life. Nothing dramatic happened. He still went to work. He still had meetings. He still felt tired later in the afternoon. But one thing was different. He had kept the promise, and that small win felt surprisingly powerful, because for months, maybe years, Alex had been breaking promises to himself. I'll sleep earlier tonight. I'll wake up early tomorrow. I'll fix my routine. But this time, the goal had been small enough to actually succeed, and that success created something new. Momentum. The next morning, he did it again. 7:15 a.m. Wake up, water, stretch, coffee, no phone. It still felt simple, almost boring, but that was exactly why it worked. Because real habits rarely look exciting in the beginning. They look ordinary, quiet, repetitive. But repetition is exactly what makes them powerful. And slowly, day by day, Alex was beginning to build something he hadn't had in a long time: control over his mornings. The first few days felt simple, almost too simple. Wake up 15 minutes earlier, drink water, stretch, make coffee, no phone. At first, it didn't feel like a routine. It just felt like a slightly calmer start to the day. But Alex kept repeating it, day after day. Some mornings were easy. Other mornings were harder. There were days when his body still begged for more sleep. Days when his hand almost hit the snooze button out of habit. But the rule stayed the same, just 15 minutes. Nothing more. After the first week, something interesting happened. Waking up at 7:15 no longer felt strange. His body started adjusting. It wasn't perfect, but the resistance was smaller. So Alex made the next tiny adjustment. Another 15 minutes. Now his alarm rang at 7 o'clock. Still manageable. Still realistic. Still small enough that it didn't feel like torture. And with that extra time, he added one more habit. A short walk outside, nothing intense, just 10 minutes around the block. Fresh air, sunlight. Quiet streets before the city fully woke up. At first it felt awkward. walking alone that early. But after a few days, Alex began to look forward to it, because those walks did something unexpected. They cleared his mind. Instead of starting the day with notifications and noise, his brain had a few quiet minutes to wake up naturally. And that small difference started showing up in the rest of his day. At work, Alex noticed he could focus longer. His brain didn't feel as foggy. Tasks that normally took 2 hours now took 1. His coworkers even started noticing small changes. You seem more awake lately. You've been productive this week. Nothing dramatic, just small comments, but those comments reinforced the habit. Because now Alex wasn't just waking up earlier, he was seeing results. By the end of the first month, the change was even clearer. His alarm now rang at 6:45, 45 minutes earlier than his old routine, but it didn't feel extreme. Because it hadn't happened overnight, it had happened slowly, 15 minutes at a time. And those extra minutes gave Alex space to build a real morning routine. 10 minutes of stretching, a short walk outside, sometimes reading a few pages from Atomic Habits by James Clear, sometimes just sitting quietly with coffee while planning the day ahead. The changes were still small, but they were consistent. And consistency, Alex was learning, was far more powerful than intensity, because the goal had never been to wake up early. The goal was to slowly become the kind of person who respected his mornings. And for the first time in years, that version of Alex was starting to exist. At first, the changes in Alex's life were almost invisible. Nothing dramatic happened overnight. He didn't suddenly transform into a productivity machine. He didn't wake up bursting with motivation every morning. In fact, many mornings still felt normal. But something subtle was happening beneath the surface. His energy was different. Before, Alex used to start the day already tired. Now his mornings felt calmer, more controlled. Instead of rushing into work half awake, his brain had already warmed up. That alone made a huge difference, because mornings often set the tone for the entire day. When Alex arrived at the office, he noticed he could focus faster. His mind wasn't foggy anymore. Tasks that used to feel overwhelming now felt manageable. Small problems were easier to solve. He made fewer mistakes. And slowly his productivity improved, not in a dramatic overnight success way, but in a steady, reliable way. And people around him started noticing. One afternoon, his team lead casually mentioned it during a meeting. "You've been on a good streak lately." It wasn't a big compliment. But it stuck with Alex, because just a few months earlier, the opposite had been happening. Missed details, late work, constant fatigue. Now the pattern was reversing. The same small habit that gave him better mornings was also giving him better focus. And that focus created more confidence. Alex started feeling slightly more in control of his life, which led to another small decision. Instead of using his mornings only for coffee and stretching, he added something new. Learning. Nothing intense. Just 15 minutes, a short online course, a tutorial. Sometimes a coding lesson on YouTube. Sometimes a structured lesson from Udemy. The goal wasn't to become an expert overnight. It was simply to learn something small every day. 15 minutes of improvement, 15 minutes of skill building. At first it felt slow. Progress wasn't obvious. But Alex remembered the idea from Atomic Habits. Small habits compound, just like money invested over time. And after a few weeks, the learning started adding up. Concepts became clearer. Skills became sharper. Even at work, Alex started noticing things he hadn't understood before. Suddenly, he could solve problems faster, write cleaner code, contribute better ideas during meetings. It wasn't magic. It was simply the result of small improvements stacking together, one quiet morning at a time. And the most surprising part? The habit that started with just 15 minutes earlier was now quietly reshaping Alex's entire day. By the third month, the difference in Alex's life was no longer subtle, it was visible. Not in some dramatic movie-style transformation, but in the quiet details of his everyday life. His alarm now rang around 6:30 a.m. a full hour earlier than his old routine. And the surprising part was that it didn't feel painful anymore, because the change had happened slowly, 15 minutes at a time. His body had adjusted, his brain had adjusted, and most importantly, his identity had started to shift. And Alex no longer thought of himself as someone who struggled with mornings. He started thinking of himself as someone who respected his mornings. That shift alone changed a lot. His energy levels were noticeably better. Instead of needing 3 cups of coffee just to function, 1 was usually enough. His mind felt clearer during the day, and with better sleep came better decisions. Late night snacking started disappearing. His evening routine became calmer. Sometimes he even put his phone away earlier without forcing himself to. Over a few months, Alex noticed something else. His body was changing too. Nothing extreme, but small improvements. He lost around 10 pounds simply from sleeping better, walking more in the mornings, and snacking less at night. His face looked less tired. The dark circles under his eyes slowly faded. Even his posture changed slightly, more upright, more relaxed. People around him noticed it. Friends commented that he seemed more energetic. Co-workers started asking how he stayed so focused in the mornings. One even joked, "Did you join some secret productivity cult or something?" Alex laughed, because the truth was much simpler than that. He hadn't joined any extreme routine. He hadn't forced himself into some impossible schedule. He hadn't followed the intense discipline of people like Dwayne Johnson, waking up at 4 a.m. every day. Instead, he had followed a much quieter strategy, the one explained by James Clear. Improve by 1%, start ridiculously small, let time do the heavy lifting, and the results weren't limited to his energy or health. They also started showing up in his career. Alex finished the online course he had been slowly working through on Udemy. A few weeks later, he applied some of those new skills in a project at work. His manager noticed. A few months after that, Alex received something he hadn't expected. A raise, not massive, but meaningful. About $10,000 more per year. For Alex, it felt like confirmation. Not that waking up early magically creates success, but that small habits can quietly unlock opportunities you were too tired to see before. And all of it had started with one decision, just 15 minutes earlier. When people hear Alex's story, they often assume the lesson is about waking up early. But that's not really the point. The real lesson isn't about 5 a.m. alarms, strict routines, or becoming some hyper-productive version of yourself overnight. The real lesson is about something much simpler. Starting small. Because the biggest mistake most people make when trying to change their lives is thinking that transformation has to be dramatic. They imagine a moment where everything flips instantly. One day, you're unmotivated. The next day, you wake up at sunrise, run 5 miles, read 3 books, and suddenly become a completely different person. But real life rarely works like that. Real change usually begins quietly, with something almost invisible. A tiny decision repeated again and again. That idea is exactly what James Clear describes when he says, habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. At first, the improvements feel insignificant. Waking up 15 minutes earlier doesn't look impressive. Drinking water in the morning doesn't look life-changing. Walking for 10 minutes doesn't look powerful. Reading a few pages of a book doesn't look like success. But habits are like seeds. When you plant a seed in the ground, nothing happens immediately. For days, sometimes weeks, it looks like the soil hasn't changed at all. No tree, no leaves, no visible progress. But beneath the surface, something is happening. Roots are growing. Strength is building. The foundation is forming. And when the plant finally breaks through the soil, it seems like the change happens suddenly. But the truth is that the real work was happening quietly the entire time. The same thing happens with habits. Small actions repeated daily slowly reshape your identity, not just what you do, but who you believe you are. Alex didn't become more productive because he forced himself into a perfect routine. He became more productive because he slowly became the type of person who respected his time, the type of person who protected his mornings, the type of person who understood that tiny improvements compound over time. And once that identity changed, the rest of his life started adjusting around it. Because when your identity shifts, your decisions naturally follow. You don't have to fight yourself every day. You simply act like the person you've become. And that's the real power of starting small. It's not about doing less, it's about doing something so manageable that you can repeat it long enough for it to grow, just like a seed turning into a tree, or a small habit slowly turning into a different life. The truth is, most people don't fail because they lack motivation. They fail because they expect change to happen instantly. We live in a world obsessed with dramatic transformations, 30-day challenges, extreme morning routines, videos promising to completely change your life in a week. And while those ideas sound exciting, real growth rarely works that way. Most of the time, real improvement looks slow, almost invisible. Wake up a little earlier, drink a glass of water, take a short walk, read a few pages, learn something small. Then repeat it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. At first, nothing looks different. Your life still feels normal. You don't suddenly become ultra productive. You don't feel like a brand new person. And this is the moment when most people quit because they assume the habit isn't working. But what they don't realize is that change is quietly building beneath the surface. Just like money slowly growing through compound interest, just like a seed growing roots before it ever breaks through the soil, small habits compound. That's the simple idea behind Atomic Habits by James Clear. As James Clear famously said, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." Goals give you direction, but systems shape your life. And sometimes the most powerful system isn't complicated at all. Sometimes it's just one tiny improvement repeated long enough. For Alex, that improvement was simple. 15 minutes. 15 minutes earlier. 15 minutes of quiet before the noise of the world began. Those 15 minutes slowly turned into better mornings. Better focus, better energy, better opportunities, and eventually a completely different version of his life. So tonight, when you're lying in bed with your phone, scrolling through endless videos on TikTok, ask yourself one simple question. What if tomorrow didn't require a massive life reset? What if it only required 15 minutes? Set your alarm just a little earlier. Give yourself one small win. Then repeat it, day after day. And if this story helped you see habits differently, take a second right now. Follow the channel, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story, and share this video with a friend who might need this reminder too. Because sometimes the smallest idea shared with the right person can quietly change a life.